Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the EPOC Group's March webinar. My name is Olivia Kirkham, Project Manager with EPOC, and I'm pleased to have Dr. Stuart Selby and Dr. Mehran Zarabini from Catena Consulting host this month's presentation discussing challenges throughout the pharmaceutical supply chain and opportunities for the use of blockchain technology. Just to give everyone a brief summary of EPOC for those who may be joining for the first time this month, EPOC aims to bring together all stakeholders in the pharmaceutical industry and is focused on educating the sector on innovative technologies and their uses across the drug supply chain. EPOC hosts a variety of content from webinars and workshops as well as larger conferences. If you have not already done so, be sure to sign up as a member. It is free to join by visiting www.epoch-group.org. Throughout today's webinar, you are encouraged to submit questions by simply typing them in the window that appears after clicking the Q&A button within Zoom. Stuart and Mehran will answer your questions towards the end of the broadcast. Lastly, a thank you and mention to EPOC supporters, JOPAC and Veritrac. If your organization is interested in supporting an EPOC event or hosting a webinar, please do not hesitate to contact us on info@epoch-group.org. Now, without any further delay, I will pass it on to Stuart and Mehran to begin.
Thank you very much, Olivia. I presume I'm going to start sharing my screen. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar. We would like to thank EPOC, of course, for inviting us to present to you today, and I do hope that you will find this useful. Before we begin, we'd just like to make a few introductions. Firstly, a little about Catena. We are a consortium of consultants from across the globe working together. At present, we have 23 experts from a range of industries, including 3 doctors, a lawyer, a chemical engineer, and an economist, amongst other types of people. We all met as digital currency master students, and we are linked by our shared interest in how we believe blockchain can transform business and society. We believe our uniqueness is that we have a broad industry experience, but also extensive blockchain know-how, and this allows us to advise strategically and operationally for our clients. We have secured partnerships with 5 well-established developer firms in 3 countries, so we're able to provide vetted technical expertise as well as business strategy consulting, and our partners work with us to help build solutions as required. My experience is as a consultant anaesthetist in the NHS originally, 20 years as a doctor, and then for the last 10 or so as a healthcare strategy consultant. For the last 2 years, I've been advising companies that are building blockchain solutions. I was part of the medical chain team, helped raise $24 million at ICO, and helped them and advise them on the building of a blockchain-enabled electronic healthcare record solution. I'm also Chief Medical Officer for Biohacks International, which does microchip implants and an identity platform with blockchain. Most of the work that I've done has been in the healthcare space, although more recently I've been asked to work on supply chain projects in the art world and also on a project related to medical negligence insurance. My colleague, Dr. Mehran Zarabini, has been involved in the startup and management of a number of companies in South Africa, particularly because of his expertise with an emphasis on sustainable manufacturing. He recently established the largest tire recycling facility in the country, where supply chain is inherently complex since it involves public, private, and consumer participation. They too are exploring blockchain solutions for this, which will potentially add significant value. He is also involved with the development of a fintech solution for the unbanked and underbanked women in South Africa, this too utilizing blockchain and a mobile virtual network operator. So, taking a brief look at our agenda today, I will first present my understanding of the current and the short-term challenges in the pharmaceutical supply chain, and then follow with a broad overview of blockchain, how it works, as well as the value proposition that we believe blockchain has in general terms. Dr. Zarabini will then follow with a review of the heritage supply chain solutions and where and why we see potential benefits for blockchain, specifically in the pharmaceutical industry. Miran will then present a blue ocean strategic approach to determine the future profile of a blockchain company or blockchain solution in this space. And the final 15 minutes or thereabouts will be an open Q&A session. In the interim, please write questions in the Q&A window at the bottom of the screen. And if you get a chance to vote for, on the 2 questions which have popped up in the poll, then please do so now. We'll review them a bit later on. Now, clearly there are some challenges ahead for the pharmaceutical industry, and remaining agile and adapting to a changing business environment is critical for companies to remain competitive. The supply chain has always been a significant percentage of costs for pharmaceutical firms, and now, as we see some interesting changes on the horizon, it is even more important that this is well managed. Those that are innovative are likely to have an edge over their competitors. And we can see several challenges visible along the chain. With many patents expiring over the next 6 years, companies are likely to see revenues significantly dented. And in spite of great efforts having been made in recent years to improve supply chain efficiency, most still have significant work to do before smooth production scheduling or make-to-order manufacturing is a reality. The consequence is that there remain inventory challenges tying up working capital and overheads at significant cost. The pharmaceutical product range has also become much more diverse, and manufacturing and distribution have become more complex, with a range of products such as biomarkers, stem cell therapies, and precision or genomic medicine becoming increasingly prevalent. Novel approaches are becoming more necessary to sustain efficiency. Of course, different product types and different patient segments require different supply chains with shorter product life cycles, and also adding to the complexity, and in some cases, like personalized medicines, final production may need to take place at the point of care or at the pharmacy. Thus, I would say a strategically designed supply chain as a means of differentiation may add economic value. And clearly, there are a number of forces, both internal and external to the industry, that are motivations for supply chain innovation. For example, live licensing allows for incremental product launches, but has the consequence of more gradual revenue growth and a subsequent slower return on investment. So the adjustment to the supply chain accordingly will be important. In addition, the growing emerging markets present product portfolio challenges and security risks, and these too require novel approaches. Reduced incomes and higher levels of self-paying patients influence the product and the service designs. And additionally, the number of recorded cases of counterfeit, stolen, or illegally diverted medicines has risen nearly 9-fold since 2002. Pharmaceutical companies are also increasingly under greater public and regulatory scrutiny. And with the number of recalls up 50% year on year, supply chain compliance and track and trace improvements are vital to satisfy these requirements. With global warming and water shortages also coming more into focus these days, many companies will be considering their manufacturing locations and also methodologies, and this will naturally affect the supply chain as options are explored. Towards the patient end of the supply chain, we see new models of healthcare delivery evolving. So with self-administration of medications, for example, and community or home-based care on the rise, we can expect the distribution network to widen even further. And then e-prescribing and the digitalization of health means that supply chains may evolve to enable factory-to-patient delivery of medicines. Coordinating with companies such as Amazon or third-party logistics providers may be beneficial in this. And then finally, as outcome-based care becomes more prominent, pharma companies are under greater pressure to demonstrate the value that can be derived from their products. And adding services that complement these products will add further complexity too, but can be potentially supported by a more robust supply chain. So there are clearly some areas of focus. And with this in mind, I would say that data-driven decisions in the supply chain are becoming increasingly critical for value creation. What is more important is the need for integration and coordination of the many data silos across the supply chain. And in all of the reports that we've read, the consistent message is that the standardized data and data processes and data sharing and contract optimization and stakeholder collaboration are essential for any actionable real-time data analytical insights. And the ability to use this data for operational decisions where rapid responses in supply and demand are required is likely to be extremely valuable. Dr. Zarabini will focus much more on the value proposition of blockchain later on. But for now, I think it's worthwhile to say that with enhanced data integrity, increased cross-party trust, and the use of smart contracts, we believe that the focus on process automation, enhanced track and trace capabilities, and integrating multiple supply chain components will pay large dividends. And even without integrating the three main higher level supply chains, which are the sort of healthcare services, medical devices, and pharmaceutical supply chains, allowing just pharmaceutical supply chain stakeholders to have a real-time view of the current state of the chain should allow more accurate planning and delivery. So to summarize thus far, I would say that there are significant challenges ahead for the industry, and a supply chain that adapts to these challenges will result in economic value being generated. And this may even be a way in which companies can differentiate and compete. Data integration and sharing, as well as cross-party trust, are essential to achieve this. We have a brief look at the audience poll. You saw the questions came up at the beginning of the talk. Has everybody voted? I can't see any results on the screen. I'm not sure if Olivia can see the result. Give me 1 second. Okay, well, we can come back to those results later on. But essentially, it would be nice to know what the sort of general understanding of blockchain is in the audience. In the meantime, I'll assume that it's lowish, and we'll carry on to the very basics of blockchain. Now, understanding the deep technical details is not necessarily relevant or even appropriate for today's discussion. Instead, I would like to explore the basic principles of blockchain and the potential value that we think can be derived from the application of these ideas. So essentially, if you were to picture a spreadsheet that is duplicated thousands of times across a network of computers, and then imagine that this network is designed to regularly update the spreadsheet, then you have a basic understanding of the blockchain. So what we have, therefore, is a database which is distributed so that all network participants have a copy. No single participant is in control of the content. Rather, as the parties broadcast changes to the database, a current state of truth is established by the protocols of the network. What this does is it establishes consensus of what data is valid, and only once agreement is achieved across the network can the new truth state be established. Each state change, or each new state, is then timestamped and permanently recorded in an ever-growing chain of records so that a full auditable trail of states of agreement can be viewed by all parties. And I like to compare this with the time machine system used in Apple computers, for those of you who are familiar, because I think visually this gives a flavor of a sequence of states linked together in time. However, with blockchains, this occurs across the network and is immutably unalterable after that. If anybody has any questions, please do type in the window. So each state, therefore, has a unique digital fingerprint, which is dependent on the content of the transactions at that state. And if you look at the bottom middle of the slide, we see as a word gets put in and a cryptographic hash function is applied, a digest or an output is achieved. And for any given input, the output will always be the same. So these fingerprints are called hashes. And as you see, any change in a transaction will change the fingerprint. Now, although it's not possible to derive the contents from the fingerprint, it is easy to verify whether the contents have been altered, as the fingerprint will not match that which is expected. Additionally, the fingerprint from each state is included as content in the subsequent state. So if you look at the third picture, the one on the right, what this means is that the alterations in one state will have repercussions further downstream and will be immediately visible. So in practical terms, if a nefarious actor wanted to alter the record of a given transaction, they would have to alter the record on every copy simultaneously, it would also have to ensure that the subsequent blocks in the chain are altered too, in order to keep a cryptographically consistent account that all can agree on, to therefore achieve consensus and a state of truth. It is worth mentioning, however, that there are different consensus mechanisms for different types of blockchain solutions. And while it's probably not the time to go into the debate of permission versus public blockchains, it is important to say that there are degrees of decentralization and that there are trade-offs between privacy, security, and scalability, depending on the desired levels of trust and functionality of the system. The desired levels of trust and the number of parties in the network, amongst other things, will also determine the choices of solution. Great, and we can see the results. I would say roughly half of you appear to be happy with basic concepts, and only the lower third do not really believe that blockchains will change supply management, which is interesting. So thank you for answering that. Another fundamental component of some blockchains is their ability to run smart contracts. Now, for those unfamiliar with the term, a smart contract is a self-executing and self-enforcing computer program that executes the terms of a contract. Now, each copy in the network executes this set of instructions so that consensus continues to exist that a task has been performed. In theory, the complexity of these contracts can range enormously and can represent anything from a single instruction to a complete set of rules that govern entire autonomous organizations. When employed, smart contracts can be used to ensure efficient, unambiguous, and automatic executions of agreements, which can then be viewed instantly across the network by all participants. So it stands to reason that this level of automation and clarity can speed up processes dramatically at great cost savings. So to summarize, I would say the value proposition of blockchains and the use of smart contracts, what these systems provide is a communications channel implemented as a peer-to-peer database, which allows multiple entities with diverse economic interests to collaborate where it is natural to cheat or seek advantage, or where trust doesn't exist. And when presented with information, a participant in this network can self-verify the content, the author of a record, the state before and after each record, and whether the record is complete with any additional omission. So by creating a real-time, visible state of now that has been agreed across the network as valid, blockchains enhance transparency, they reduce frictions, they broker trust, improve security, and provide confidence in the integrity of data. And because cryptographic signatures are employed for each transaction, a full audit trail and greater accountability is achieved. And also with no central point of failure, the system is always on and not controlled by any single entity. The biggest question, of course, that most of you will have will be whether the investment in blockchain is worth the trouble. And at face value, as we've discussed, it would appear that there is enormous cost-saving opportunity from process automation and improved efficiencies. The pharma supply chain has historically had clear deficits when benchmarked against other industries. And as we see in this slide, several areas have been identified where innovation may save billions of dollars. But what is perhaps less apparent are the potential revenues from deploying such solutions. Now, it may be that companies that create market leadership through innovative supply chains may be able to sell or even license their blockchain as a service to the others in the industry. Additionally, the enhanced data integrity may bring with it new insights that generate new opportunities, particularly when combined with AI. Faster payments may also be possible, particularly when using native cryptocurrencies on blockchains. And improved supply chain visibility may lead to recycling opportunities. The World Economic Forum report from 2013 suggested that blockchain use may increase trade volumes by 15% and may increase global GDP by 5%. What I'd like to say as a large caveat here is that stakeholder collaboration is essential for success, because the technology is by design a tool for collaboration and permits trust to be brokered where it otherwise may not exist. So with all the above in mind, it must be stated that blockchains are not a panacea for all ills. However, with the right use cases, the technology has the potential, we believe, to be transformative. Several models have been designed for assessing the appropriateness of using a blockchain. I presented one such model from the World Economic Forum in this slide. This will be shared, I'm sure, but no need to go through it. But if I summarize it, I would say, in short, if you are exchanging digital assets of value or managing contractual relationships, and you normally rely on a third party to broker that trust, a blockchain may be useful to you if you require permanent, authoritative record of events where multiple parties share right access and don't necessarily trust one another. And I would like to now hand over to my colleague, Dr. Mehran Zarabini, who will continue.
Thank you very much. Just bear with me a second while I choose the correct screen. Thank you and good afternoon once again. Just bear with me to go into presentation mode. Great, I think we have it there. There's no doubt, certainly, that supply chains evolve in complexity as the healthcare system is more developed within which they operate. So from an ad hoc system in developing nations, which tend to be unstructured and ill-defined with little metrics in place for performance measurement, to more integrated and extended models, certainly in the developed world. And the integrated approach strategically focuses on improving customer service and achieving its health improvement objectives. Health commodities are managed and supplies across partners, logistics functions, and health system levels, meaning that it sets goals and monitors overall system performance and its individual functions. And if we have a look at the extended model stage, supply chain management has expanded to cover institutionalized coordination between different distribution systems and suppliers that serve all those types of markets. And this stage represents a challenge even for the private sector in developed countries because it requires significant amounts of operating trust among separate organizations. And hence providers, suppliers, and payers must share data to link products and outcomes. By doing so, they must create a kind of network advantage, leveraging from the strength and resources available from suppliers. So therefore, in the current most sophisticated forms, a number of challenges still persist in modern supply chains. And they arise and exist because of misaligned stakeholder incentives and goals, and information fragmentation and issues such as communication failure. But there are quite a number of very strategic technology trends for supply chain that have been suggested and how they can provide a kind of competitive advantage into the future. And for instance, utilizing artificial intelligence to enhance and kind of automate decision-making and remake the customer experience is going to be very important into the future. Mobile applications that utilize machine learning capabilities, for instance, to provide skincare products upon analyzing data from mobile cameras, can be used to collect buying behavior data and ultimately determine the demand for skincare products. Another example is the adoption of IoT devices is certainly growing in many kind of supply chain domains. And these devices have been utilized extensively in sourcing, logistics, demand management, and services. And these include improved asset utilization, higher uptime through remote monitoring and maintenance, and improved customer service by better understanding customer needs and proactively responding to and shaping customer demand. Then we have conversational systems, most recognizably implemented today in virtual personal assistants, or what we call chatbots, and they're taking interaction to the next level with the addition of conversational kind of commerce. Not only can they handle discovery questions and offer solutions without any human agent involvement, but conversational systems can also enable transactions, handle payments, ensure delivery, and provide customer service. And various other areas of interest include that of kind of robotic process automation and immersive technologies such as VR and augmented reality. So if we then have a look at the kind of market trends and dynamics, it's certainly evident that in recent years, the main trends surrounding healthcare supply chain have been to improve operations efficiency under value-based care and demand for an increase in cloud-based solutions. And the supply chain is kind of being viewed as much more strategic enabler of healthcare system objectives than it was in the past. And there's no doubt, though, that some of this is largely being driven by the economics of healthcare changing over time. And if we have a look at the compound annual growth rate of global healthcare supply chain management, it's kind of gaining traction of about 8.4% in the last year alone, and is expected to reach about 2.3 billion US dollars. And this market is projected to grow at a kind of staggering figure of around about 40.2% up to the period of 2023, further demonstrating its perceived importance. So really, there's been a seismic shift in the global business environment, such as increasing competition, very high operational expenditure, growing fragmentation of the healthcare industry, shortening product life cycles, the removal of trade barriers, supply risks such as political and regional uncertainty, and that's creating uncertainty for the adoption of healthcare supply chain management. And obviously this change in external business environment is compounded by the transformation of also the internal business environment. And a good example of this is kind of growing organizational size, growing complexity of business in general, outsourcing, multiple vendor management, and so forth. And the big advancements in tech, such as what we're seeing in analytics, machine learning, and the advent of social media and big data coupled with growing capabilities of this technology, creates a situation of kind of winner takes all. So early adopters of supply chain management solutions will really have a critical advantage over those who fail to understand its central position in the healthcare business. And if we have a look at the kind of opportunities that there are for blockchain, well, supply chain management is obviously one of the most promising areas of this emerging technology. And proposed benefits for healthcare may be seen in use cases such as pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and durable goods. And some of the cases that we're shown here include accountability in shipping, tracking, and the transfer of goods, the ability to reduce counterfeiting and theft, and also help better manage inventory and prevent stockouts, expirations, and misuse. And the other four examples that we have here are also especially well suited for the pharmaceutical supply chain. One of the most compelling use cases is that of drug quality and track and trace, and certain regulation requires electronic and an interoperable system to identify and trace prescription drugs distributed throughout a particular network or country. Second, controlled substance monitoring, and a good example of this is the federal government in the US is increasingly holding the pharmaceutical industry responsible for monitoring the supply chain for the illegal and out of patent ordering of various drugs, and is therefore penalizing distributors. And therefore manufacturers become kind of concerned that they too will eventually be held accountable. Third, cold chain monitoring is vitally important to ensure the temperature integrity of pharmaceuticals across the supply chain, according to various local and international guidelines and obviously stringent regulations. And cold chain shipments are projected to grow substantially in the next few years. And if we have a look at the fourth and final example, monitoring the source and provenance of active pharmaceutical ingredients from raw materials through manufacturing and final product manufacturing is subject to increasingly stringent regulation. So there are various trusted partners who essentially need visibility of the supply chain in verifying the journey of the drug from manufacturing and ultimately to patient delivery. And if every entity on the supply chain can have visibility of inventory and audit the distribution of the medicine, that certainly makes it more difficult for counterfeits to reach the market. So it's therefore a reasonable question at this stage to ask what advantages blockchain solutions offer over the current tools in use. And if we can put it rather simply, since records are distributed across multiple areas and are updated as each block is created, there is always a high level of availability of the data. So even if a large number of nodes on the network fail or are shut down by an attack, the data is still going to be available for people to access. And since the system regularly updates itself with the latest block, accessing any of the active nodes means acquiring the latest data, even in the event of an attack, which is a highly desirable trait for network security. And the major issue with centralized systems from a network perspective is that they're prone to attack and act as a single point of failure. And we've seen this with many large organizations, such as internet companies who have acted as a single point of failure and have been prone to attack in the past. And a huge amount of cost goes into ensuring the security of these kinds of networks. And in addition to being able to access the latest block from any active node, the system can continue to process additional data and add more blocks onto the chain. So not only is the data accessible, the system continues operating as long as there are active nodes in the system. And while partnerships and consortiums are usually created with obviously the best intentions and with all of the legal necessary requirements in an attempt to protect all parties involved, there always lingers this concern of trust, especially in cases where parties involved may be competing in other areas of business. And because of the decentralized nature of the blockchain, this kind of issue is significantly mitigated as trust is not needed in terms of processing data as well as storing it. So verifying that one has the same information that another party has is relatively easy to do without the need for additional trust among third parties. And in order to gain an understanding of the current state of play within the competitive landscape, we begin to assess various companies developing blockchain solutions for healthcare supply chains. And obviously there's a large number of organizations in the process of developing solutions, and we've really focused, excuse me, our attention on 3 blockchain companies who are specifically developing healthcare solutions. And they're displayed here: Modem, MediLedger, and BlockVerify. Modem's solution addresses 3 main challenges in today's supply chain. They are collecting digital data and monitoring relative events in the physical world, automating business processes across a supply chain ecosystem, and optimizing the supply chain based on trusted insights and predictions. The MediLedger project, which is quite well known, is certainly built to give pharmaceutical partners a way to keep up with evolving track and trace compliance regulations, as well as find better ways to partner inside a shared ecosystem. And the system utilizes the blockchain to provide a secure, private and trust building network of pharmaceutical leaders to record the change of ownership of prescription medication. BlockVerify, on the other hand, provides a solution that has a recorded history permanently in the blockchain, which certainly tracks pharmaceuticals throughout the supply chain to ensure consumers receive an authentic product. And by looking into the strategic position of these companies, we can assess whether they are capable of creating a leap in value for not only buyers, but the company, and then see what a blockchain company offering into the future requires to simultaneously create cost savings and ultimately buyer value. And obviously this approach is well documented, where industry boundaries are defined and companies try to outperform their rivals to grab a greater share of the existing market. And what we aim to do is to determine the industry not in existence today, but that of the unknown market space, unexplored and untainted by competition. So in this slide, we essentially show the graphic depiction of a company's relative performance across its industry's factors of competition, and the range of factors that we're going to discuss and that an industry considers key or essential to the promotion of the blockchain solution is displayed on the horizontal axis. So eliminating complexity around the product offering is a key focus for healthcare solutions. And a simple supply chain experience and user-friendly processes are certainly needed to unlock valuable insight and enhance innovation. And obviously products are becoming more complex and regulatory scrutiny certainly a lot stricter. So product life cycles are changing and pharmaceutical companies are expanding their product offerings in order to remain competitive and gain a greater market share. Supply chain blockchain solutions are particularly interesting where a network of different players in different geographies have to coordinate their actions, and supply chain partners must find ways to collaborate more effectively, capturing the benefits of high-performance supply chains beyond organizational borders and across the complete healthcare value chain. And blockchain solutions are certainly not going to disrupt the healthcare environment overnight. The solutions that are presented here are still largely in a state of development and not yet commercially available. And various aspects of funding, government's collaboration need to evolve a lot further before there's going to be broad scale adoption and integration of business processes takes place. And obviously companies that are developing proof of concept models at this stage may be able to gain a first mover advantage with practical use case solutions and functionality as the technology matures into the future. Modem, as we've described, uses shipment-specific smart contract functionality built on the backbone of the Ethereum blockchain, coupled with various IoT devices to store measurement hashes with respect to various temperature presets for shipments of pharmaceuticals where temperature can have a detrimental effect on drug safety and quality. In fact, temperature control, shipment visibility, and inventory management have been identified as the top challenges facing global health pharmaceutical delivery. And if we have a look at a heritage supply chain system, including web-based and cloud-based systems, do not always provide a holistic and complete view of the production and movement of products. And the interoperability of future supply chain solutions is certainly a highly desirable characteristic and will have a high impact on the efficiency and costs within the supply chain. So these blockchain-based interoperability solutions may see limited success if governance issues including data definitions and common standards are not agreed upon by a majority of stakeholders. But while the industry evolves, solutions that focus on interoperability in combination with governance are certainly going to likely succeed. And here we present what we call an eliminate, reduce, raise, and create grid, or the 4 actions framework for blockchain-focused healthcare solutions. And the grid is just basically a simple matrix derived from our previous slide's discussion that drives companies to focus simultaneously on eliminating and reducing, as well as raising and creating. And by eliminating complexity and cost in the supply chain and raising and creating several factors that we've discussed, the value cost trade-off can be broken, creating a leap in buyer value for various organizations wishing to implement blockchain-based solutions for healthcare. And in this slide, we can expand on the industry's factors of competition to include a future strategy canvas, which details the future prospects for an organization developing a solution. And the strategic profile of the future entrant differs quite dramatically from that of both a heritage supply chain and that of an existing blockchain solution that we see that's in the current proof of concept and we've discussed previously. And for ease of reference, I've just included one of those solutions on the particular canvas. But the strategic profile of the future entrant has clear focus. It emphasizes on 4 factors: global presence, smart contract integration, IoT device integration, and certainly interoperability. And by focusing in this way, the value curve of the future entrant can certainly stand apart. And when a company's strategy is formed reactively as it tries to imitate or differentiate slightly from other incumbents, the value curves of the company's competitors are virtually identical. And divergence from the industry's value drivers is key to a blockchain company's success. So those incumbents that focus on collaboration and competition, global presence, and have a high level of interoperability with enhanced governance and simultaneously achieve low cost are likely to create the most value in innovation and remain sustainable into the future. However, if we look at operationalizing blockchain, it's clear that business leaders have kind of a trepidation about wading too deep into uncharted waters. And perhaps it's kind of a deep realization that implementing blockchain in any legacy paradigm is no doubt very difficult. So there's a lack of permanency in blockchain implementations and future thought leadership around them. And no doubt we've seen in 2017 numerous fluffy white papers filled with buzzwords that are intended to confuse rather than to inform. So implementing a value-generating blockchain is by no means a trivial matter. It requires a kind of rewiring of the business ecosystem and interactions, which ultimately results in change, disruption, and transformation. But that's not the only problem there is. For many businesses, and it's common all over the world, the legacy monster is alive and well. I mean, the majority of companies, and especially large multinational ones, have kind of 1 foot in the future and 1 foot in the past, or 1 foot in the here and now. And 1 foot looking forwards towards enhanced data and insights afforded to them by machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence, and 1 foot firmly in the past where operational worries continue to fester around. And while there are a number of technical hurdles in operationalizing blockchain, the single most valuable precursor or prerequisite is having the thought leadership, the knowledge capital, and the transformative thinking required to map forward a viable long-term strategy. And understanding the pathway to commercialization and the operationalization pipeline from initial use case to POC, and finally how to achieve scale while all managing this change is certainly key. But before wrestling with questions of technology, resources, staffing, I think a kind of more fundamental question would be who should be involved in this process? And the simple answer is a group of partners that will participate in processes and outcomes guided by an agreed upon set of standards. And blockchain development and implementation demands collaboration in order to set standards and develop infrastructure. And the key is to identify who specifically should participate and what the roles of individuals will be. And one must also be aware that the consortium should be adaptable and scalable as the blockchain application matures. But there's no doubt that this kind of technology is a foundational technology, and its implementation will bring many challenges, but also offer great rewards. And early adopters could see the benefits sooner rather than most, and while potentially establishing themselves as leaders in areas that should only grow in importance over time. So at this point, I'd like to summarize to say that blockchain leads to shifts in the business value chain. It enables forward platform-based business strategies based on externalities and demand-side economies of scale. And understanding its applicability does not occur in isolation or in a vacuum. It's very important that all business influences, objections, and questions are certainly considered. Understanding the pathway to commercialization and the operationalization pipeline from the beginning initial use case to the proof of concept, and finally how to achieve scale and ultimate implementation is vitally important, bearing in mind that the technology is kind of continuously evolving at the same time. Increasing efficiencies and driving costs are the priority for most organizations, and supply chain really accounts for a large percentage of these costs and are more amenable to transformation than other healthcare expenditures. So consolidation and centralization of services are some of the trends that we've seen in an attempt to achieve these improvements in the past. But greater collaboration and information sharing is required to make a significant impact. And with trust and data integrity being hard to achieve, blockchain solutions promise novel ways in which co-opetition models may potentially flourish. And the most successful pharma companies will be certainly those that seize the initiative and start building these agile and kind of efficient supply chains. So from our perspective, from a Catena perspective, our approach really is simply to determine the feasibility of blockchain implementation, for our clients using various strategic frameworks, some of which we've shown in this presentation. And through our established partnerships with developers, we would then develop a proof of concept if applicable. And based on the successful outcome of the proof, we would then scale the solution for implementation. But key here is to ensure that the correct technology is deployed based on each client's business model and strategic objectives. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we can have some time for questions.
Yeah, hi. I can see some questions popping up. I'm not sure if everybody is able to see them, so I'll just read the first one. The question is, what's the view on timing, and when will blockchain be developed enough to be applied without huge time loss in transactions and without damaging the planet due to energy absorbing systems? I'm not entirely sure what the question is asking about the time loss in transactions. The energy absorbing question is possibly irrelevant depending on the type of consensus mechanism that you choose to employ. So if you're using something like Bitcoin, which uses proof of work system, then that clearly will be a very energy intensive and inefficient, bad for the planet kind of system. And if you go all the way to the other extreme where you have permissioned blockchains, such as those by Hyperledger, or there's a number of them, then those will not have any proof of work consensus mechanisms at all. So they don't require the mining of coins, and essentially would just work like a very, very efficient database. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think also if we have a look at the kind of transition with the Ethereum blockchain, which a lot of the smart contract functionality is being built on, essentially that's what it was designed for. I mean, they're actually in the process of moving away from proof of work, which is highly energy intensive, to a kind of proof of stake mechanism currently at the moment as well. So I think a lot of those newer developed blockchains, and especially the kind of consortium blockchains, have also recognized the issue of the kind of energy requirement for consensus, and are actually moving away to a much more efficient and much more feasible kind of stance with respect to verifying transactions and so forth.
Excellent. So the second question from Francisco says, I'm not sure, I'm just going to read it again because I can't tell if anybody can see it. It says, sponsors and suppliers, as well as suppliers amongst themselves or competitors, have been very reluctant to share data, for example, across a clinical trial. Some reasons: own internal standards or policies, data privacy or security, intellectual property, etc. And it has been impossible to build true industry standards across sponsors or suppliers and agree on data standards. How can blockchain change this data protectionism? I think one of the advantages of the blockchain is that it allows a granular permissioning system. So with with the ability to only isolate the things that you want to share, or sort of pseudonymize some data, then that gives the opportunity to have access to big data which is pseudonymized, and maybe in a collective rather than as an individual. And I think the way that blockchains probably will be most successful is as collaborative efforts. And so I think that building joint ventures is almost certainly the way to go forward when it comes to, it won't be just one particular pharmaceutical company which should lead the way or build it. I think it should be in combination with a number of stakeholders, all seeing the advantage of having a shared infrastructure. Do you have anything to say about that, Anna?
Yeah, I think from a strategy execution perspective, I think it's quite interesting, because there's going to be kind of major hurdles for many companies who have been working in kind of heritage supply chain to make that dramatic shift. And obviously the first one is that kind of cognitive hurdle. It's waking up employees and management to kind of let them know that there's going to be a need for strategic shift. I mean, often many of these organizations are wedded to the status quo. So that's one of them. Obviously, the other one is a kind of political one. There's obviously opposition from powerful vested interests that they must continue with the status quo and not actually create that leap in buyer value. And then obviously we've got to look at things like motivation for all the people working in the company, and ultimately what are the resources that are required to do so. So I think it's not just a timing issue, but it's also an execution issue for many large companies that are out there, and especially those companies with a lot more hierarchy and that type of thing. They're less likely to kind of create that shift to this new way of thinking.
Maren, did you want to take the next one as well? Because
I actually can't see the questions.
oh, I see.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it says you earlier stated that the winner takes all. Isn't it likely that the Amazons of the world are already the winner due to their current data collection models and highly developed supply chains?
Yeah, there's no doubt that companies like that can create that kind of shift, but there's certainly going to be opportunities for companies who recognize the importance of that first mover advantage into the future. And it may not necessarily be these huge organizations like Amazons and the Googles of the world. There's certainly going to be opportunity for lots of smaller entities to recognize where buyer value is going to be created and kind of create an uncontested market space. But I think the way that we have outlined it here is how do they create that uncontested market space? Many of companies, they tend to focus on kind of creating niche kind of strategies where they kind of segment the market as much as they can, but then they're focusing on a very small cross-section of buyers. Here we're kind of looking at ways where we can create an uncontested market space by looking at non-customers or non-consumers of existing products and really creating what we call that blue ocean shift, for really creating areas which we think that many other incumbents in the industry will not be able to replicate very quickly.
And then there's another question about which players in the pharma supply chain should take the lead in building blockchains for pharma. And there's a mention of transport, logistics service companies, manufacturers, wholesalers, consumers, and then further, how will it be paid? It's a difficult question to answer because it's such a new technology, but I think the paradigm shift that needs to be understood is the fact that it is a collaborative technology, and that the benefits of collaborating and the co-opetition model going forward is much more advantage than the I'm going to build my own blockchain and try and be profitable. We're living in an integrated world, and data is the new gold. So the ability to share and trust in the sharing of that data is crucial for sort of Web 3.0, 4.0. And so I think that when it comes to building a solution like this, it will probably be modular. Maybe certain stakeholders will build certain components of it, but it's where they sort of build a jointly funded or joint venture and agree to collaborate on certain, maybe less threatening initially use cases, and then once the proof of concept or value has been demonstrated, expanded even further, so that ultimately, hopefully, there could be a full, 10,000-foot view of the state across the supply chain, and everybody will see the value in that. I don't know if Maren has anything further to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, the other thing I could think about, obviously, there's going to be various kinds of blockchains that are developed and built for various other kinds of industries. But I think that they may certain of those other kinds of industries will have applicability to healthcare. So there's no reason why certain of those companies can't leverage from some of the advantages built of blockchains in other industries as well. So I think there's going to be kind of crossover where you'll have blockchain solutions, but for multiple industries, similar to what we've seen, for instance, with IBM Watson. I mean, they built originally a solution which was for, I think they have one good example for the tracking and traceability of shipment of roses from Kenya to Holland. And again, temperature was one of the key items there. But that kind of solution is easily applicable into the healthcare environment with the temperature of pharmaceuticals and so forth.
I see Matthew Wilson has asked the question, what is your opinion on consortium blockchain solutions and the ability of a consortium to effectively roll out a technical solution across global, typically slow-moving enterprises?
Yeah, I think from a consortium perspective, there's certainly a lot of advantage, because obviously they're pooling a lot of the resources and they're utilizing the expertise of many different organizations who are kind of operating in this space. So I think we're going to see the dominance of these kind of consortiums into the future, but obviously their kind of solutions may not be applicable to every kind of problem, and I think there'll still be an opportunity for kind of bespoke blockchains to be built for specific needs.
And I think as these consortium blockchains, or any blockchains are being built, I think the modular approach will be, or the interoperability of various blockchains will also become important. So it may be that for certain aspects, you have 3 trusted partners and you want to have a permissioned component of the blockchain, but for anchoring some data into a public blockchain for various other components of the business, that may be more acceptable. So as we see the technology develop, I think interoperability of blockchains will make some of these questions a bit sort of mute, in the sense that the systems will just be running in the background in the same way that HTTPS or TCP/IP are running in the background, and no one really considers how they work. I think that's all the questions that I can see. So I think given that there's no more questions on the time, I'll say thank you very much for participating and listening to us today. If I can hand over back to Olivia, I think she had one further thing to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both Stuart and Mayran. That was a very informative discussion and lots of great questions asked. So if anyone in attendance is wondering about viewing the presentation again or sharing it within their network, the recording will be available to members. To receive the on-demand webinar, you can simply sign up as an EPOC member at www.epoch-group.org. And lastly, thank you to everyone attending and joining this month's webinar. Should you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to send that along to info@epoch-group.org or get in touch with Dr. Southey or Dr. Zarabini directly. And we look forward to welcoming you all back next month.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.